My name is Peter Young, and I'm a member of the Committee 100, and I want to welcome you to this webcast on the Committee 100 Asian American Career Ceilings Initiative. And this particular one is focused on the millennial perspective. First, I just want to take a moment just to explain Committee 100 for those of you who are not aware of the organization. But it's 31 years old, and it was founded by a group of individuals after Tiananmen Square, where they felt there was a need to have an organization of diverse people with different backgrounds focus on issues both in terms of enabling Chinese Americans in terms of their community and awareness and legal and political, the domestic agenda, and the other is in a nonpartisan way to help facilitate knowledge and understanding between the US and China. Both of those are serious problems. This particular program that I'm chairing is really part of that domestic mission of ours, which is to try to help Chinese Americans and of course Asian Americans who have the same issues deal with things that are getting in their way towards progress or political clout or discrimination. Which right now is a serious issue, as we all know, right? This is a 1-hour webcast, and we will end on time. After my welcoming comments, I'm going to introduce the panelists. We'll have a panel discussion for about 40 minutes, but we're going to make sure that we leave at least 10 or 15 minutes at the end for questions from the audience. There are two ways that you can ask a question. One is you can use the chat function, which I think most of us are quite familiar with the chat function. And the other is a Q&A function. They're essentially the same. So either way, we'll be able to see the questions and I'll pose them to the panelists. First of all, I do want to say that we're going to follow the following order. We did do a survey of a couple hundred millennials, and we're going to start by just showing you some charts, and you'll find it very interesting to see what their feelings are and what their perceptions are of this career ceiling problem. Some are very make a whole lot of sense and sort of match your intuition, and a few are surprising, and I think you'll find it interesting. But then what we'll do is we'll split the remaining part of the 40-minute segment into two. The second, I will ask each of our panelists to spend some time talking about what their career path was, but also their own personal experiences and lessons around this topic of career ceiling. And each one has a different experience, different professions, different stages in their careers, but they're all millennials, and I think you'll find that helpful. And then at the end, we'll broaden it out, and really all four of us will really talk about, on a broader basis, what we think is happening with regard to millennials on this issue, and what are some of the lessons and observations. So with that, let me share the screen. And so this survey, actually all of you, by the way, we had 433 people register for this event. And as you all know, because all of you registered, we asked 6 survey questions, 3 which were qualitative and 3 that were quantitative so that we could show the data. And what we have here, I had my staff at my firm do the analysis of the data. And what we're going to do is just show you what the results are. The first of the 3 quantitative questions was, how serious do you think the career or glass ceiling is for Asian Americans in your profession? And the survey, if you filled out the survey, you had a choice of choosing between 1 and 10. And you see at the bottom, the scale goes from 1 to 10, with 10 being very serious and 1 being not serious, not an issue. And on the left-hand side, you'll see percentages. So 0, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. And the way you read that is, for example, here under 8, it says that, 23% of the people who responded felt that 8 was the appropriate ranking. So what does this show? It shows something rather clear. There's a huge increase as you go above 5. And what's clearly the case here is that all of the survey respondents, really a large percentage of them felt that it was a serious problem. And only a few felt it wasn't much of a problem at all. So that is clear, and that is not surprising. We then asked the second question, which is, for you personally, how serious have the obstacles been? And the interesting thing is, although it is true that that more of the results are in the serious range, because over here it's 20%, 17%, so forth. But the interesting thing is, if you compare this chart with the chart before, their personal experience, their feeling is, yes, it's a problem, but not as serious. Who knows why? It's very hard to say, because we don't have enough data on the people who filled out the survey to say, but it was very interesting. So they feel it's serious for the overall group, and serious but not quite as serious for them personally. The next question was, how much of the ceiling has been due to third parties and society? In other words, things out of the control of you, your family, and ethnic group, and how much is due to your own actions, and or Asian culture, such as study hard, you'll succeed, stay away from politics, less aggressive, etc. The scale was that if you felt that it was entirely due to third parties and society, you would put 10. If you felt it was entirely your own actions or your ethnic group, you would put 1. The interesting thing here is you'll see it really clusters very much in the middle. So what this says is that a large portion of the respondents felt that the problem was as much their own actions and their own ethnicity versus the outside world. So that was very interesting. So it's not, it's the environment that's the problem entirely, and it's not, it's my own actions or ethnic group. Then we went further and we said, well, we wonder if the results would be different if we were to break it down by different groups. So the first thing is the first question, again, how serious is the ceiling, career ceiling? And we show the results by male versus female. So black is the line you saw in the first chart, and that's for the overall group. And blue is male and red is female. Now this is very interesting because actually there's not much difference. So the male only and the female respondents pretty much were very, very similar to the overall. And this is one I was surprised. I thought maybe it was more challenging to be a female Asian American, but apparently that is not the opinion of those who took the survey. The next way we did it is as you recall, we asked everyone, are you in your mid-level, beginning, or senior level of your career? The black line, of course, is again what the results were for the overall group, and the gray line, senior level, green is beginning, and mid-level is purple. I guess my staff did some interesting color coding. So I guess if you're senior, you're gray, and if you're beginning, you're green. So I guess that was appropriate. But you'll see here, for the most part, through this whole scale, there's not much that you can conclude. The only thing you can conclude at all from this is that when it came to 10, which is a very serious problem, you'll notice here that it spikes heavily at the senior level. And this is actually consistent with some of the literature out there where the belief is that in the early years, education, early career, Asian Americans are not as disadvantaged. But as they get to the mid-level career and higher, they start to be disadvantaged for a variety of reasons. So that's interesting. The second question is, for you personally, how serious have the obstacles been? And here the black line is for the overall group. And here we again look at male versus female, and you'll see there's not a big difference. It's not statistically significant. There are some differences in point to point, but not enough to say that there's a difference between the male respondents and the female respondents. And then for you personally, how serious have the obstacles been? And by level of seniority, again, just like the overall picture, the senior people at this more senior levels felt that there was a much greater set of obstacles. So very consistent with the observation about the overall group. And then the question about how much is third parties in society versus your own actions and your ethnic group. The interesting thing is really almost no difference if it's male or female. Very, very little difference. So whether you're male or female, the opinion group is basically saying that it really clustered in the middle, and that they feel that the group, male or female, they feel that that they can really blame both as a reason. How much of the ceiling, and if you look though by career stage, really no observation. And so those are just some of the results. And I think interesting, first of all, we had a very, pretty good sized sample, but the takeaways are, one, clearly the millennials who filled out the survey felt that there was a serious problem. They really felt it was really serious for their group as a whole. And they felt it was not quite as serious, but still serious for them personally. There doesn't seem to be a difference by male or female on a lot of these questions, but clearly also those people, as they reach the senior levels within the millennial, age group, they felt the problem became very, very serious, right? So very, very interesting. And with that, I think I'd like to now turn to the second part, which is really, I'd like each of our panelists to tell us a little bit about your background, but also your own personal experience and whatever experiences you wish to convey to the audience about this issue as it related to your own personal experiences. So Julie, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Peter. Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Sun, and I'm currently an MBA candidate at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business. So to briefly walk you through my career, my very first job out of college was being an internal consultant for a global financial services company in Germany. Then I moved on to become a project manager for the property and casualty insurance company in New York, where I helped to plan a post-merger business transformation. And then I also spent a few years as a data science project manager at a life insurer where I was able to learn about operationalizing some of the advanced analytics effort. Currently, I just finished my first year of MBA, and I'm currently interning at an M&A strategy consulting firm. Mm-hmm. So in order to explain my career path as an Asian American prior to B school, I would break down my experience into really two parts. First being the recruiting, and then second being performing successfully on the job. And in terms of recruiting, I think it includes both landing that first job out of college, as well as making the move into the role where you want to be during your career. And in general, my overall experience in recruiting within the insurance industry hasn't really been limited by my background as an Asian American or a female. But I do believe that this varies greatly by industry and also the culture of the company. On the other hand, while I was working, I think the most limiting factor that I faced was that a lot of times my capabilities or even characteristics were determined by my first impression as a female Asian American. So to give you an example, I have had multiple experiences where I was not given a speaking role or was being frequently interrupted because perhaps I seemed to be very quiet or shy or soft-spoken. Being an Asian American, I'm also often identified as a foreign national who does not speak fluent English or understand American culture. And this really led me to situations where I had to be extra outspoken about my background of having lived and studied in 6 different countries, including the US, and also about the unique value and personality that I bring to the team. So from very early on in my career, I learned the value of investing in a one-on-one time with people, whether they're colleagues, managers, or senior leadership, and really taking the time and efforts to build each relationship early on so that people knew me as who I am as an individual.
Mhm. Well, that's wonderful. And I gather you're having an interesting COVID-19 experience in school, right? An internship, right? So,
Yeah.
and I guess one day it'll it'll get over, we all hope. Matt, would you like to go next? Explain your career and then some of your personal experiences?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Julie, for that background and sharing your experiences. So, hi everyone. My name is Matthew Choi. I'm currently a vice president at Granite Point Mortgage Trust, which is a publicly traded REIT in which we invest in commercial real estate debt products. I started my career in investment banking at Credit Suisse, and subsequently have moved on to get a grad school degree at Columbia's Master's of Real Estate Development program. And since then have worked in both real estate private equity investing and real estate debt investing. Worked at Green Oak and Cerberus, and most recently Torchlight, and now at Piper for the last 5 years. So really been in finance from analyst all the way until where I'm at today. Also on the side, I'm an adjunct professor at the Columbia's Master's of Real Estate program, so can share some unique perspectives with working with the students there as well. I think one of the big things that I think I've encountered, at least just working in Wall Street throughout as an analyst going through, is that I do feel that the burden of proof as an Asian American junior person seems a little higher. I always feel that you always have to be very prepared and also be perceived as the most hardworking, the most technically sound, and also there's a lower margin of error. I do feel, for example, that if I make a mistake on something, I think that it may be scrutinized a little bit more or viewed a little bit more carefully versus if some of my non-Asian colleagues, across levels can maybe potentially get away with a little bit of minor mistakes or whatever. Second thing that I've noticed that is a potential hurdle is having the Asian stereotype that maybe we're not as aggressive or assertive, having presence in meetings and commanding respect while you're presenting and while you are making an investment pitch seems, again, like a little bit higher in terms of in terms of a burden of proof or in terms of a standard. As Julie articulately pointed out, we do get interrupted during presentations and the flow gets messed up a little bit. I do feel that when sitting in those meetings with similar colleagues, those may necessarily not happen as much, and it does seem to be a hurdle that I have to overcome by knowing my material and being concise and articulate and speaking more directly. And I think last thing that I think that a big hurdle of mine that I've encountered is that I think being at times the only Asian American in the kind of front office or investment professional on investment teams, it is a little bit tougher to and more difficult to identify mentors. I think that mentorship a lot of times, mentors, because of the lack of Asians in senior management positions, a lot of mentors do select people that have, that resemble themselves, right? It's just natural. So I do think that it's a little bit more difficult. However, a way that I've, found is that, networking is super key. You should always, be well-rounded and be kind to people so that, you can develop these one-on-one relationships. And by well-rounded, I mean, in addition to being, well-spoken and technically sound, use aspects of your background that interest people. Like if you're a golfer, if you like sports, connect with people that way. And I've definitely found that, having these, doing that in combination of, being, reaching out and being kind allows you to be charismatic and be liked. And that really helps when it comes to, succeeding in an organization, because being liked is almost as important of a skill set as being good at your job.
Now, John, you have a different profession altogether. You're in the medical profession. So tell us about your career but also your personal experiences related to this overall topic.
Sure. So hi, everyone, and good to see you, Peter, Julie, and Matt. So like Peter said, I come from sort of a medical science background. I'm currently a research fellow at Harvard University. And so I suppose, just very briefly about my background, I kind of came to science and medicine reluctantly. And in college, I took time to do internships in journalism, worked for a law firm at one point, and even after college had a brief foray into kind of documentary filmmaking before I came back to the sciences and then started a PhD. I think overall my impression is that there is a glass ceiling, a bamboo ceiling within the Asian American community, but we have to be aware that in the academic world, I think that kind of a bubble, it's a place where life is hard for everybody. I think Asians within this field, medicine and academia, do very well for the most part. But I do agree with Julie and Matt that it seems like we're hireable, we get positions, but we're also seen as being very hard workers, but not maybe having original ideas. So sometimes we're not recognized for being original thinkers. And I think in that aspect, it's difficult a lot of times for Asian Americans to maybe rise as well within academia and within medicine. I think for some of my personal experiences, there have definitely been cases where I've been told, or I've seen others be told, that they're too quiet, or that they don't share or speak up. I think a lot of times the pressures that I feel within medicine and research is that we are kind of expected to work harder, I think because we're seen as being so successful within this profession. I've literally been told by a superior before, Asians work hard, right? And I kind of answered, yes. And then they said, okay, so you should work harder. And I think to me, it was like, I'm busting my ass every single day. I'm the first one in. Sometimes I leave like after midnight. And just because they don't necessarily see it, and because we're not as vocal and communicate such things that we do, it's almost like, are we working hard enough, or is it just that we can never work hard enough because people just don't really see us in a position where we can really be as competitive outside of just the box that we belong in or that we started in. I think what I've learned from some of these experiences, though, is that communication is really key. So when we have meetings or when we do departmental discussions or seminars or discussions like that, it's really key that you speak up. And kind of as a first impression, especially in research, if you're able to give someone feedback, in any way, even if could be criticism, could be positive, just the fact that you speak up showed interest, and you're involved somehow on a greater scale than your own project. I think that's something that has kind of opened my eyes and shown me that people are receptive to that. And in that way, you can come out of that kind of that perception or a box of being humble and quiet and non-confrontational. And I think, yeah, for me, it's been a lot about being able to ask for help too, if you need it, because I think that's something definitely within research, within academia, that I think Asians perhaps don't do as much or as well. And then being able to speak up, but in a way to deliberately want to teach others what you know as well. So not just sort of, not having that stereotype of always being competitive and wanting to do the best yourself, but being involved on a greater scale with other people so that you can share your knowledge and sort of benefit the team or the group as a whole. But I think these are all things that, for a lot of Asians, it's still something that's difficult to recognize and to actually perform and to commit to. So overall, I agree. I think this is, the glass ceiling for us is still a generational issue, and yeah, hopefully we can change that.
Yeah, and I think that when you read the literature and the studies about the career ceiling issue, it's very interesting because I think Asian Americans, the problem is different than it is for a lot of other ethnic groups, right? Why? One is, how many people said, well, I didn't think you guys had a problem, right? Said, you guys all seem to do well, you all get to go to great schools or whatever. So part of it is there's a perception by a lot of people that there really isn't a problem, right? And clearly average incomes are higher for Asian Americans, and certainly, going to college admission and so forth. But it really is a problem. But part of the problem is that people don't think it's a problem, right? Right? Would the three of you agree with that? Because I've actually asked people who are not Asian.
I agree.
Oh, well, I'm doing these panel on because you guys really have a problem? Julie, what's your response to that? Oh, I don't know whether she can hear, but does that strike a bell with all of you, the panelists?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, okay. So John commented about the fact that it can be different by, generation, and certainly it may be also different by, by gender and so forth. To what extent do the three of you feel that there are some real differences between generations, right? How your parents experience you versus you, and maybe what you think your kids will experience. Do you feel that there's a difference? John, clearly you mentioned that, so clearly you believe that, right? That it was different for your parents versus for you, right?
Sure. I mean, so I definitely see it in my parents' generation, because my parents, my dad came over to the U.S. To pursue a PhD, and so I moved from China when I was very young, and I've definitely seen in his work and his career that I think for him it's about, you have to make sure that your work is solid. And my dad's a literature and philosophy professor, so his success is based on how original he can personally be, what the quality of his work is. I think for me, it's because having kind of a more of a, obviously an American upbringing, it's not only about being able to fulfill your talents, but it's also about being able to be social, being able to fit into this, the community and the country that we're in.
But do you think do you think there are differences along those lines by generation then?
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And so, well, the other thing to add, I think the reason I think a lot of the issues still haven't changed, so I have a younger brother who's about 10 years younger than me. And as I've gone through my career, my life, there are improvements that I personally feel like I've seen, within the Asian community and how Asians are treated in the workplace. But I still talk to him, and he still echoes some of the same concerns and issues that my parents had told us when we were younger, that I recognized when I was in college. And so seeing him come out of college and just now starting to work, the fact that there are improvements that I thought had changed things, but he's telling me it's not changing, I think is or it's it's similar. I think that's kind of my personal proof that things are not changing as quickly as possible.
Now, you saw I'm going to go through the questions that we all discussed. You saw the charts about how the survey, people who answered the survey felt about how serious it was. You feel the same way, or do you feel it's a little different? Certainly one other is, I was surprised that the female respondents didn't feel it was all that different from the male. And so certainly, Julie, I don't know, you may or may not believe that makes sense, right? From, your perspective. So each of you, maybe Julie, starting with you, is your own personal opinion that, kind of the level of seriousness of the problem is similar to the way the survey worked out, or do you feel differently?
I would agree with the survey result. I think this is certainly a serious problem for all the Asian American millennial generation. From my experience, as well as from my friends and people from the same generation, this is the problem that certainly becomes more explicit as we progress up in our career, and especially starting with the managerial position. And I'm a believer that I don't think there's a significant difference between the experience between the female and the male candidates, but I do think that it's really highly dependent on the industry and the company culture. And one thing that I will add that is that as a female Asian American, we also have a support from the other female colleagues in the company, which sometimes act as a more powerful network of supporters.
Yeah. Okay. Matt, your feeling? Do you sort of match what the survey results are, or do you?
I do agree. I think the generational question you asked before was super interesting. Being first generation immigrants, and having John and I and maybe perhaps Julie benefit from that. The way we were raised and how similar we are definitely helps. But to answer your question more directly, I do think the problem is serious, especially when you go from the kind of the mid-level to real senior management C-level positions. And I can speak just really based on my industry. The underlying numbers of representation are a little disturbing. And however, throughout my 10 plus years of my career, I do see some improvement. However, I think it's been very slow and potentially not for the correct reason. You do see now, at least in my industry, a lot of more, at least not a lot, more senior personnel of Asian descent in the fund structure and all that stuff, because the economy is just more global than ever, right? And so you see a lot more, as China and other Asian countries become a dominant force globally, you do see Asian professionals put in senior positions, but a lot of times it's just for pure capital raising purposes, or to be the figurehead of a region for an American firm. So I think that in traditional finance or banking, at least, where your corporate success is based on kind of politics, relationships, and salesmanships, I do still see Asian Americans struggle to kind of assimilate better and break through the bamboo ceiling, as you've mentioned.
Yeah. By the way, I want to make just one global comment, and I'm particularly sympathetic towards the millennials because at this time frame, because that period from 26 to 40 is such a critical part of your career, right, in terms of being successful. But the millennials, independent of Asian Americans, the millennials have really, suffered economic downturns at the wrong time, which has nothing to do with being Asian American, but makes it tough because that makes it even harder to succeed. But I think the other is, let's face it, let's be honest, the current environment is very negative about China, and then it's flowing over to Asians as a group, and that's not making it, it's making it harder, right? Rather than easier. Because, one, we're not considered necessarily having a problem, but now there are a lot of people who, somebody said that, being against China has become a bipartisan, belief, right? And so it's just not good. So it just means my sympathy for the millennials, because one, if you're Asian American, that's a challenge, but also this is an economic period that'll make it particularly, particularly difficult, right? So it's just means you all got to work harder, right? By the way, I happen to know some of the panelists here, and the idea that they would ever be considered as not aggressive and soft-spoken is clearly fake news, right? I can clearly say that about Matt. Matt was never, I don't think, ever accused of being soft-spoken and not willing to speak his mind. Is that correct, Matt?
Yeah, up to a point.
I can second that.
So
well, I work at it.
So on the broader topic here also is, from all of your experiences and so forth, each of you, when you were talking about your audience, you had a couple of suggestions for the audience about things to keep in mind or things to do that will help. Any additional ones? Because I know you were all just picking one or two examples from any other additional, ones? I will start by just saying one thing that is important is seeking out mentors. And it is really, ethnically, Asian Americans tend not to think in terms of finding a mentor. And quite frankly, they don't think in terms of being a mentor either, right? And that's very much an Asian kind of phenomenon. But both of those are really, really important to be successful in this society, right? Maybe different if a different society. And I would encourage everyone to seek out mentors, develop them early on, but also try to be a mentor yourself, right? Try to think of the guy who's coming after you where you could help out. So let me ask each of you, are there additional, observations or suggestions from your experience that you'd like to share with the audience?
Peter, I would just add two more things. I think the first thing that when I was talking about my background was, recognizing that this is a serious problem and making an explicit plan, whether that's networking or finding a mentor, as you mentioned. Two other things I think we need to do is, from an individual perspective, I think it's really important to find a place that has a culture, processes in place, and the right leadership set in place to help, that will help progress the diverse workforce. And I think the tone of the leadership and all those processes set in place will allow for a easier or rather smoother transition into the senior leadership for Asian Americans. And from a community perspective, I think we need Asian Americans to really help each other. And this is not only from Asian Americans who are in leadership positions right now, but also among peers like us, in whether it's referring connections or even helping to form a community that we could all rely on. And I definitely see that this is something that we lack compared to other ethnic groups.
Mm-hmm. Matt or John, any further comments?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add, what I perceive, from kind of just teaching at the Columbia point of view. I definitely think that every year when I teach that there's a disproportionate, really large amount of Asian students pursuing grad school studies and doing well in school, because our culture, as we've mentioned here, obviously value education and academics. And, I think that we make very strong students because we excel at discrete tasks. And I think that a lot of times, a lot of these students think that would translate well into the workforce. And I think that one of the advice is that, although you need to be, academically, sound and technically sound, you can't be task oriented. You really need to understand the big picture and be well-rounded. The people who translate well from school over to kind of the workforce are people that are dynamic, people that have interests and are able to have a level of salesmanship when they speak and being able to be a little bit more than just being excellent at their discrete tasks. So lastly, I'll leave with the comment is, control what you can control and excel at what you do, because if you do excel and become part of this, part of the senior management, you'll be part of the solution looking out for the Asian Americans, just like how Julie mentioned.
Yeah. And I do think that one of the things, and this is not advice to each individual, but to the overall group, is Asian Americans do need to be more active politically, because we don't really, a lot of the things happen, you know, in government, et cetera, and we're not there, right? We're not there to really have a role in influencing things. Now, this is a core of a group. I'm not saying everybody should follow a political career, but as a group, we need to be more active politically, because so many decisions are made and we're not there, right? To be involved or to encourage people to do the right thing. So, and we had Gary Locke, by the way, as a speaker a couple of sessions before, and he said that. He said, you got to get involved. It's not typical of Asian Americans to get into politics, but as a group, we need to be more active to sort of control more of our own destiny, right? So we have some interesting questions from the audience. And so we might revert back to a session, but we'll have a whole long list of questions here. So, so let me try here. Okay. Oh, here's one that related to something that I think John said, but this was a question to Matt. And it says from Regina Kim, she says, it's very interesting to hear your story about, I always thought it would be easier for Asians to succeed in professions like finance, banking, medicine, since there's so many of those in the field. But I see how it could be challenging if your colleagues have higher expectations for Asians. So it's sort of a question, right? And I guess the question is, does that make sense to you, and how would you react to it?
Yeah, I can comment on that. I think, no, thank you for the question, Regina. I think that, you know, the context of the bamboo ceiling is to accelerate within an organization and reach decision-making chairs at C-level positions. And I think that you are absolutely correct in that, you know, at the junior level in finance, and Peter can attest to this, I think that Asian Americans have, you know, had relative success, you know, landing the jobs and being able to do the technical work and you know, executing the deals. However, you know, when you are in a traditional kind of banking or private equity organization where promotions are given, right? It takes a lot more than just those hard skills. You need to develop a lot of soft skills and be able to politic within the organization. So I think within those roles, I do see a challenge, and I think that, you know, it's something that, you know, over time, as you know, second, third, fourth generations of people and Asian Americans develop more you know, skills from a salesmanship and that standpoint, we can see people in those, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? As you see more Asian Americans in political positions like Andrew Yang or senior management, you know, like our moderator here, then they will also inspire Asian Americans to reach for those positions and help Asian Americans to get to those chairs.
Now the next question is a very interesting one, and so I think you'll find it interesting. It says, if you, and this is from Bill Kwong, he said, what might you have changed the way that you were raised, I guess if you could control it, and the way you were educated, that would have helped you to become a more effective professional? So I guess his question is, if you had a time capsule and could go back and make some changes in how you were raised or how you were educated, what would you have hoped or wanted to have differently that would have helped you be more effective? Interesting question. And this is directed, it's to all panelists, so I'm not going to pick on anyone.
I'll say something about that. I think, and this is sort of to tack on to what Julie and Matt had said earlier too, but I think especially being raised, right, and going through the education system, amongst Asians, there's this idea of, you know, you've got to be the best. And I think the difference that I've heard between, you know, my parents telling me that and my friends' parents is you'll hear from them like, do your best, they tell their kids. And for us, it's always like, you've got to be number one. So I think in some ways, I think for like educationally, yeah, I like worked hard in every stage of my schooling. But I think if I had to go back and do it again, I think I would definitely at some points tell myself, you don't have to be the best at this. You don't have to sort of like at all costs make sure that you satisfy, the expectations of your parents. And that at times it's much more important to be different or to be original in your own thinking and your own ideas. And I think if that's the case, perhaps we might take more risks, or we might try non-traditional career paths, or get to a point where we're not so. I think culturally we're very concerned with status, with like the name brand of our schools and things like that. But I think something that within my field and in science that I've learned is, an original idea or a thought or something that you can even introduce and not just, do yourself is really worthwhile. And so if we can, maybe inspire other people, younger generations to do things like that differently too, and not just always think, we've got to get the best names or the best brands, because there are a lot of kids out there who, may not have the same opportunities and come from disadvantaged backgrounds, but they're just as capable, just as smart. And if we just, if those Asians who are in leadership positions or in senior management positions, for instance, are able to recognize that and reach out to those kids, I think that's something that would help the whole movement. And I guess that generational issue along.
But I'll make one comment, and I know the question wasn't directed at me, but one comment generally, which is, I'd like to see more Asian Americans as they're growing up trying to find the professions that they had the most passion about and that really fits them personally. And clearly, I don't know what the data says, but my own feeling is there's more of a tendency in Asian families for the parents to direct the careers of their kids.
Yeah.
And, in the end, whether that means they were, unhappy or happy, whatever, the reality is it certainly would suggest that a lot of people didn't feel they necessarily went to the career that they really wanted to. My father was a professor. He said there were only two things he thought I could do. One, he said I should go to MIT, which I didn't go to. And the other is that I should either be a professor or a doctor, and that was it. And nothing else was honorable. And it really was a fight to persuade him that that's not what I want to do. So a lot of it in success is whether you love what you do and it's a good fit, regardless of how society is treating you, right? So now I've got one comment here from a fellow Committee 100 member. It's not a question, but he's got a comment, and it's directed to John. And Buck G, who's a fellow Committee 100 member, says, to John, so it's specifically to you, John, I disagree that it's a generational issue because Asian issues was identified by the EEOC as a problem 30 years ago. National EEOC data shows that there's no significant change in Asian promotional rates into middle management since 2007. So pre-millennial and millennial rates are substantially unchanged.
Yeah.
So go ahead, John.
Yeah,
you can respond since you've been challenged by.
This is perfect. So hi, Buck, and I'll just say I watched the presentation that he gave about a week and a half ago on the bamboo ceiling, and I looked at some of the data that he presented as well. I mean, I do agree with what he says that generationally over time it has gotten better for sure, but he told his own story about how in his career at one point he was, I believe, sorry if I get this wrong, but he was only one of 104 like VPs or something within his company, and one of 104 that was Asian American. And I remember, someone asked him, is that true of other Asian groups? And there was a stat there that said, that Indians in that same population, there were 40 Indian VPs. And so it digressed into this whole question of, is it specifically to, I guess, Chinese, Korean, Japanese, kind of our group of Asians?
East Asians.
Yeah, East Asians
versus South Asians, right?
Versus South Asians. But I think it's, at least within my field and my experiences, I think it's a generational issue. I can't speak to business or to the corporate world, but I will say, yeah, I think things are getting better. But when you see examples, not just in academia, but I have friends who work in government and work in law. I know people in the entertainment industry too, and it's still a huge, huge, huge problem. And so while I think we're making progress bit by bit, I don't think that progress is coming as fast as other minorities are experiencing them. And I don't know if that says something about East Asians as a group in terms of how we operate, but certainly I think there's a lot more room for improvement. And so I say generationally, like I said, again, my own testament was I hear it from my younger siblings. And some of their concerns were literally things that I thought was getting better when I was leaving college, and maybe that they didn't have to struggle with. So yeah, thank you, Buck. And I enjoyed your presentation as well.
So the next question actually relates to exactly, John, you mentioned South Asians, Indian Americans, and in fact, if you look at the data, there's no question that there's a difference in success at the C-suite and at boards between different groups of Asian Americans. And probably the biggest noticeable one is that there are far more Indian Americans who are CEOs and on boards than Chinese or Korean and so forth. So this question here is from someone whose initial is H, and who says, I work in tech in San Francisco. Our industry is filled with C-level executives who are Asians, but primarily Indians, American Indians, from companies such as Google, Microsoft, to startup companies. This trend of placing Indians as CEOs is starting to permeate to different industries. And then carefully worded question, how does this reality relate and add to the overall discussion of ceilings for Asian Americans in the workplace? H, you'd make an excellent politician. You asked a question in a way that was politically correct, but got to the point. So, people may not be comfortable, making the distinction, but it is a fact, right, that Indian Americans do better. Any comments on that? Any lessons, perhaps, to learn from Indian Americans that would help people who are Asian Americans and who are Chinese or Korean or Japanese?
I'll add the point from here. So being in business schools, we do have different ethnic clubs available on campus, and one of them is Asian American group. And a lot of people generally associate Asian American as East Asian or maybe like Southeast Asian, but not including Indian or American Indians. And the board members at the Asian American Club here is also exploring ways to include Indians as part of the community, because we consider them as Asian as well. So I think there is clearly a difference in the perception of Asian among even the East Asian and the Southeast Asian and then Indian. And I think that probably permeates throughout the industry as well, not just on campus. And I think that in terms of discussing the ceilings for Asian Americans in the workplace, I think we should also try to create a community where we can easily reach out to these people as well. Not just Koreans for me, for example, but I will also reach out to Indians or other Southeast Asian population in the industry.
That's right. Any other comments from either Matt or John?
I mean, I agree that there is a delineation between South Asians and their I don't want to use the word stereotype, but how non-Asians perceive South Asians and how non-Asians perceive East Asians, and having gone to UCLA where there's a lot of Asian people, a lot of the Asian societies there also are East Asian specific, and South Asians are categorized differently. And I do think that some of the stereotypes that we've mentioned today and some of the struggles that we have talked about today do not apply. Now, they also obviously do not apply to South Asians. South Asians obviously go through their own, struggles and all that as well. But I think that, the Asian umbrella is definitely split into two buckets. And I think the other bucket has potentially some perceptions that have been helpful to them in corporate America rather than harmful to them at the senior level.
Yeah. By the way, our next, Asian American Career Ceiling webcast, which will be August 4th or 5th, one of the two panelists, they're two real experts who've written many, many books on the topic, but one of the panelists is Indian American, so it'll be interesting that. And I also am working on getting the CEO of a major company who's Indian American to be a panelist, because I want this to be a balanced program that's not favoring Chinese or Korean or Japanese or Indian, because the reality is it's a shared issue, but also one where there's some differences and we can learn a lot from each other, right? This next question is a very nice question. It is from, the name's cut off, from Andrea, whose last name I don't know because it's not there. Is there, really talking about this, the Asian kind of personality about being hardworking or being assertive and original ideas. So she says, so it seems like a lot of career advice for Asian Americans is about being, one, acting more American, quote unquote. Is there a way to strive towards professional success without compromising the values you were raised with? Interesting question. This is to any of the panelists who want to comment.
I mean, I can start by saying, like, I was actually going to comment on something John has said, which kind of relates to this question. I think that when he was responding to Buck, he was mentioning that, we have a long way to go, and it's not only in academia, and it's not only, industry specific. I think that to answer Andrea's question, we need to break the bamboo ceiling across all industries, including, entertainment, sports, and because as we are more profiled as leaders and seen as more assertive, if you want to use the word, or at leadership or decision-making chairs in the media and in those positions, I think that would help the overall perception. And to answer Andrea's question, maybe not directly, is that then you don't necessarily compromise who you are because the system is also helping you out.
Yeah, that's right.
Just to piggyback on that, and also to support Julie's point earlier, I think it's going to be very difficult, maybe if not impossible, for us to not compromise who we are without any help. Now, I think what I mean by that is within the Asian American community, we certainly need other Asians to help us. And I think at the same time, with things like the Black Lives Matter movement now, minorities across the country, across the world, need to be able to support one another in order for any sort of change on a large scale to be affected, and for us not to think that we can simply be ourselves and not have to fashion a resume or build up a personality in order to be recognized. And I think part of the problem with that, especially with East Asians, is the way that we are respectful in a lot of ways is equated with being quiet, right? We let the older generation, we let superiors speak. And that is a mold that's going to be very difficult to break out of if culturally, let's say, our personal lives span across two continents. So we have to be able to recognize that, let's say when we're in Asia, we have to act a certain way. Whether we're in the US, we have to act another way. And in order for that to be universal, so that we don't have to pick and choose sort of how we identify ourselves and act in different locations and within different cultures, I think it's got to be, there's got to be a lot of help within our own community and also within other minority communities at large.
Now we have 1 minute left, and I always promise that we start on time and end on time. But I'm going to end this the following way. I want each of the panelists to say one word that expresses what message they want to convey to the attendees. One word. So there's no money prize. It's just pride, right?
Wow.
So one word. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first. I was going to actually add on to that question that John and Matt just answered earlier, but my one word would be adaptive. Okay. And the reason I say that is because I think I don't necessarily think of it as compromising our values. I think depending on where you're at, which company and which team, it's really important that you adapt to that the environment and showcase the skills that when necessarily at the time of being. So,
John,
my word is going to be no. And, I'm
no to the question, or
yeah, if you want to apply it in that way. I think no, as in if we feel like we're being boxed in or not being able to reach our potential, we don't have to accept it. We can say no. Whether that's to our boss, to our parents, to ourselves, and the kind of dreams that we have, like don't be restricted. So no, say no.
Okay, that's a good one. And by the way, from my personal story, my parents wanted to go to MIT and be a scientist, and instead I went to Yale, and which was my way of saying no. And they didn't talk to me for a year, right? But in the end, it was the right decision. But it was a tough decision. Matt,
I'll just really quickly say, being from Harvard, your parents were not wrong.
Matt,
I was actually going to piggyback off John, and I think my word is going to say yes. I think the word is yes because I think a lot of Asian Americans, need to build more confidence. They need to subscribe to the idea that they can and have a positive attitude to achieve, the career goals that they want to achieve. And, they can be dynamic and they can be, control their own fate in their career.
Yeah. And since I get to have the last word, I just want to mention it, one comment, and that is, I didn't say this and it wasn't in the bio, but both Matt and John are members of FF fraternity, which is one of the oldest for Chinese American fraternities. And I'm also a member, and I am Pei, who was one of the co-founders of Committee 100, was a member, as well as a number of people in the Committee 100. And I mention that because as part of this discussion is, to the extent that you can be part of a supportive group where people help each other out and are friends and so forth, that is a wonderful thing. FF happens to be that kind of organization where they do good things, but also they develop relationships and help each other. But we encourage you to do that. And by the way, and that's why I knew John and Matt really are not, soft-spoken or whatever, because I know from personal experience. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the three of you. You did a wonderful job. And I hope the audience feels that they benefited, one, from the survey, but also the personal experiences of three wonderful millennials from three very different professions. So thank you all, and we'll look forward to the next webcast, which will be in early August.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for having us, Peter.
Thank
you,
everyone.